1984 Star Jordan 101. What did you say? Are you a bad person if you're talking about 84 Star Jordan 101 cards? Today we're going to talk about 4 specific vulnerabilities to price that I see that could be an issue for the 1984 Jordan Star 101 card. We're taking a contrarian view today, my friends. Stick around.
Able to get to the loose ball, but he's followed up Jordan with the recovery, and Jordan is fouled. The basket counts.
What's going on, sports card hobby family? It's another day. It's another sports card video. We're going to talk about the topic du jour. It's what everybody wants to talk about. And when I say everybody, I mean nobody. The 84 Star Jordan 101. I've heard a lot of chatter over the last few weeks, really talking not so great about this card, frankly. That's okay. Everybody is entitled to their opinion. And frankly, I'm actually happy that we're having a conversation over a card like this compared to 4 years ago when a lot of people were talking about, Zion or John Moran or whatever prospect there was. Now we're actually having some real conversations, which I think is fantastic. Before I dive in, huge thanks to today's video sponsor, Pristine Auctions. Speaking of Michael Jordan items, Pristine's got all sorts of goodness hanging out over there. They're running daily auctions, weekly auctions, 10-minute auctions over at Pristine. And I've got a promo code down below to take $10 off your first auction win over there, so make sure to check them out. Head down there for the link in the video description. Also, we're talking about Michael Jordan today. We have got the 23 Air Show coming to in my backyard, Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
A 1-point lead for Georgetown. Gordy to Black. The time, 18. Shot, Jordan! Michael Jordan!
At the end of April 2025. You got plenty of time to prepare. This is a Michael Jordan focused show here at UNC in the area where he played college basketball. Of course, it's going to be a great time. I will be there. Reach out to me directly if you're interested in exhibiting or attending. All right, before I dive in, I think that we should also recognize here, if you are a Michael Jordan card collector, that we're all on the same team here. I think whether you've got $5 in Michael Jordan cards or you've got millions of dollars in Michael Jordan cards, a lot of people, and myself included, I'm in this bucket of people that believe that Michael Jordan is the hobby unicorn.
Sometimes I dream that he is me. Got to see that's how I dream to be.
I think that he is the next generation's Mickey Mantle. As popular as Mickey Mantle is in the hobby, all the different cards and just the memorabilia, all the stuff, the legend of Mickey Mantle, I believe that Michael Jordan is that next person, kind of the one that is up top over here. Look at how much money is poured into Michael Jordan cards, whether they're $1 card or millions of dollars of cards. His best tippity top cards, doesn't matter. They're so popular and probably the most liquid cards in the entire hobby. Let's not forget, we are on the same team. All right, so I do have a 84 Star 101. I've got it in a 5.5, a PSA 5.5, so I'm just disclosing that here. And for all the 90s folks, those 90s insert Jordan folks, I'm with you. I liked it so much that I got the 96 Stadium Club Finest, the refractor version. A lot of people don't like the star card, dull cardboard. It's not shiny. This is the shiny version, the 96 insert version. I just thought the card is really cool, and of course, it goes with the theme. All right, let's talk about the first vulnerability when it comes to this card. Like I said, we're going to cover 4 of them, but the first vulnerability, available supply at any given time. This is something that I want to watch and see. There was a lot of hoopla over how many of them came out of the woodwork for the latest golden auction that just ended, a week or so ago? Maybe less than that. But there was, I think, a dozen that were on golden auction. So there was a lot of talk about that, a lot of chatter. Oh, this is not a rare card. Rare this or rare that or whatever. And I think this is important, whether there's 1,000 copies of a card or there's 10,000 copies of any particular card. The challenge is always going to be, okay, how many are available at any given point? If there's 1,000 copies of a card, how many of them have that card in a safe? and then how many are just trying to flip and flip and flip and flip. And it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 or if it's 100,000, it's kind of the same story. You know, how much volume is actually out there that's available in the world at any given point. So of course, what's happened here over the last, I don't know, 3 or 4 months is the Star Jordan card has moved up in price. And so naturally, I think there's going to be a lot of people that 10 years ago, they bought the card for $5,000. Now all of a sudden it's 30, 40, maybe $50,000. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to cash out. Of course, it makes sense. If you want to cash out and maybe you feel like, hey, I can take that money, I can put it somewhere else, or maybe I can buy back later. But you're just so far up on that particular card that you're like, okay, you know, let's go ahead and move off of this. It seems like it's a little bit too hot. And that makes sense. And that's kind of what happened with this latest golden auction. The sales weren't new record-breaking sales. They didn't go like through the roof, but they also didn't fall hard either. They were kind of like exactly where they had been. I think there's maybe a couple of cards that had sold at all-time highs on that golden auction. But for the most part, you know, there wasn't any kind of knock your socks off, you know, type sales from what I saw anyway. So they kind of ended exactly pretty much where thought they were going to be. One thing I did like is that I don't think that there was the same grade for these cards, meaning like I've got a copy, I've got a 5.5. There was a 5.5 that sold, there was a 6, there was a 7. I think there might have been an 8, I can't remember. There's a couple of signed copies. But my point is yeah, there was 10 or 12 cards or something, but they were at different grade levels. So at least, you know, there wasn't 5.7s, you know, or 5.8s or whatever competing against one another. And so I think what you've seen is a lot of people, again, that got in early that were like, man, I'm gonna take the cash. And look, I don't judge anyone for anything. If they want to take the cash, then absolutely. I think that that's kind of the big question mark with this card moving forward. Is it going to be a common type flip card? The person that might have bought it for 40 grand, whatever grade that is, I don't know. And they bought a copy for 40. Are they going to then sell it at 48 if it goes up to 48? Will they sell it at 52 or 55? Let's say it's kind of inching up. Will they sell it at 35, you know, and take a $5,000 loss? Or is it somebody, and this is something that nobody really knows, you know, when all the supply kind of goes out into the world, how many of those people are like, okay, I got my copy, I'm putting that in a safe. You know, I'm gonna put that away, and that's the one copy that I want to hold on to. Also, I want to cover another thing, because there's also kind of this funny like thinking that there's like Wall Street bankers that own all these cards or something. And I can tell you, I know of quite a few individuals that own 1 or maybe 2 copies of this card. JP Morgan, I don't think owns 100 of these cards. Maybe I could be wrong on this, but like I said, I don't think that investment banks are just, you know, sucking these away, you know, with all the gold bullion and the other things they've got in there, you know, rare artwork or whatever. And so again, that's the big question. But again, this is a question you would ask of any card that pops out, you know, that's, you know, fairly low supply, put that in quotation marks. It's all relative. You know, how many people are collecting that card, are holding that card, looking at that as a store of value? There's also some like jostling going on that I've seen in the Star community where somebody owns a 5 and they're trying to get up into a 6, or they're trying to get up into a 7. You know, they're selling, but they're also buying a more expensive copy than what they had originally paid. So it's kind of a weird thing. So that's what I'm watching now. You know, we've had, you know, fairly decent amount come to market. It's a reaction. Okay, prices have moved up and now they've sold. Now that next group of buyers, what are they going to do? Or do they put it in the safe for 20 years? Or are they looking to sell that next month? And that's the question that's going to have to be answered over time. Second, vulnerability. What will the pop report look like in 5 to 10 years for this card? This one is the most interesting to me, because if you look at, I think we've got a picture of the current pop report. Frank, do we have that? So there's currently on the PSA pop report 320 in total that have been graded at PSA. BGS copies, I think there's maybe like 1,200 or so. So you've got BGS that's been grading these for about 15, 16, 17 years. PSA, of course, just started grading them back about 2.5 years ago. And so approximately 1,500 is the worst case, I guess, because of course you probably got crackouts and resubs that, you know, did they send the label back or whatever? So just like with any card, you got to take this with a grain of salt. We've seen this on the pop report where you have a card that's numbered to 25, but there's, you know, it's pop 70. It's like, how does that work? Well, it's because people popping them out, trying to get a 9, trying to get a 10 or whatever. So the worst case scenario is you have 1,500 or so that have been graded by the two companies. And my estimation here is that out of the 300 or so, you know, PSA graded copies, many of those, I think 75% of those, I'm guessing a little bit, but it's got to be a pretty high percentage, 70 to 75% cracked out of a BGS slab, sent over to PSA. That's what I think. I don't think that that's 300 brand new copies that were out in the wild and none of the BGS copies have been cracked. I think we know that that's not the truth. So many of those were crossed over from BGS over to PSA. So currently you have 3 PSA 9s, you have no PSA 10s. What if in 5 to 10 years you've got 10 PSA 9s and you've got 3 PSA 10s? You know, what does that do for price points and all that stuff? And right now there are 25 or so PSA 8s. And there's about 100 PSA 7s, I think like 80 PSA 6s. So, okay, that gives you kind of a pretty good scope of what it looks like currently. And again, it's on the screen here. So yeah, what happens if a PSA 10 is graded, or a couple of them? You know, what does that do for the PSA 9s? What happens if there's more PSA 8s, you know, that pop up? And then again, it kind of boils down to what's the available supply like? Are people churning through those? Or are they like, you know what, I'm keeping my PSA 8, like that's my copy, whatever. We have seen with the BGS crossovers, now it's not always, I don't like saying always or never, but in general, you know, a BGS 8 crosses over to a PSA 6 or a PSA 7. There's one thing about these cards, they have a thick top border a lot of times. BGS was a little bit more lenient because there's a feeling, and star collectors feel this way too, that's kind of the way that those cards were supposed to be. That's how a lot of star collectors view it. It should have kind of a thicker top border. PSA does not like the thicker top border there, you know, so they're going to hit it for that. They're looking for more of a serene look to the card, a more balanced look to the card. So it's really, really rare for a BGS 8 to cross over to a PSA 8. Very, very rare. And as we've seen in sports cards as a whole, people are just paying more. That gap between PSA and BGS, and you see it, this is across all cards. This isn't just, you know, this card, but people are just paying a premium for PSA graded cards. Maybe it's the PSA guarantee. Maybe they just prefer PSA. Beckett has kind of really fallen off the map. I don't think that we can argue much about that. That's just a fact. And so I think a lot of people are like, you know what, I'd much rather have this in a PSA holder than sitting in a BGS holder. Another reason to crack it out, you know, and send it in or whatever. So the PSA copies are getting more of a premium overall. And then on top of it, they're grading it tougher typically than where the BGS grade was sitting. So you have a combination of factors there. But my card actually that I have is probably one of the more vulnerable copies. I've got a 5.5. So there's going to be probably quite a few. I don't have the BGS pop report up, but there's probably, you know, BGS 6s, 7s, and 8s that would cross over to a PSA 5, 5.5, or PSA 6. That's where you're probably going to see the biggest growth on the pop report over, I would guess, the next 5 to 10 years. So actually my copy is one that that pop report probably, you know, going to rise. Is it going to double? Is it going to triple? And then of course, as that population grows, will the demand keep up with it? Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. You know, we'll have to see how that pans out. So that would be the second vulnerability. Third vulnerability for this card. There's an estimated 3,000 to 5,000 cards of these that were ever printed in the team bags. What if that's not correct? What if there's 15 to 20,000? I think that if there was 50 to 100,000 that were printed, if there was a much larger print run than has been kind of advertised or what people think, then they would have already come to market. You know, we would have already seen that in at least in the BGS pop report going back 15 years. True, yes. Could there be somebody that's holding on to 1,000 bags of Jordan 101s? It could be. Could very well be. I don't know why they wouldn't have already come out though. You know, that's kind of the other part is as prices have gone up on these cards, you know, if you've got 1,000 bags or you know, they're out of the bag, you got 1,000 loose cards or whatever, the assumption would be that you would have sold them or at least sold them in chunks or something. And we just haven't seen a huge growth over time in the population for graded cards. So there's not really evidence for that, but it is a vulnerability. What if more are found too? Now, I do know folks that have been searching for these for years that are really zeroed in, focused on them at card shows, collections, you know, buying this wherever they can find them. And over years of looking for this particular card, telling everybody they know that they need, you know, they're looking for these particular cards. Yes, they found them, but they haven't found a treasure trove of them. But with that said, you have random finds like the 61 Fleer Wilt Chamberlain rookie that was just found in a grocery store or basement or something that got an SGC 10 and sold for $1.7 million. You know, it can happen where these cards, you know, pop up out of nowhere. And really nice looking copies, you know. So again, it kind of goes back to the other vulnerability. Will there be a PSA 10 at some point? Will somebody find, you know, the PSA 10 that's out there? Maybe, maybe not. And if they don't, will they find just nicer copies that end up getting a PSA 9, to where, the PSA 9 goes from, that number goes from 3 to 20. 20 is a lot different than 3. And will people be flipping those cards? 20 is not a lot, but it's still 6-7 times more than what it is right now. Will there be enough demand to keep up? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. We don't know that. And the fourth and final vulnerability that we'll talk about today is, what if people create team bags, or what if they find more? This is actually an 84 base set for the Lakers, Magic Johnson on the top. So this is the 84 star that the 101 is in. This is exactly kind of what a team bag would look like. Will fraudsters try to make these? Will they try to make the cards? Will they try to make the bags? I would say, again, it's fairly unlikely they'd be able to pull it off without it really being noticed. But again, we are in a hobby where fraudsters are just getting better all the time. I do, though, think that if there's all of a sudden a lot of Jordan 101s that just kind of pop up out of nowhere, or new team bags that pop up out of nowhere, it will be fairly suspicious, I think, at this point. But I don't put anything past fraudsters at all. I'm not going to pretend like they're not out there. But again, it kind of goes back to the original point of these are vulnerabilities for Star, but they're vulnerabilities for all cards. And so these are all things I think it's important to keep in mind. I'm a fan of just 80s basketball cards in general. And for me, when you're looking at, 90s inserts, I know a lot of people love those cards. I'm completely priced out of that market for the most part, unless I want to go kind of like, tier 7, for 90s inserts for Michael Jordan. But when I look at the early Jordan cards, like the Interlake, for example, I just enjoy these cards, even though they're not shiny, even though they're not refractors. To me, it fits more of my price point, and I can enjoy, just as much. Anyway, folks, I wanted to take a contrarian view for the 84 star Jordan 101. And the one thing I really like, though, is there's a lot of just passionate Jordan collectors, regardless of kind of which niche you're into. And I certainly enjoy the debate. Like I said, at least we're debating something like this, as opposed to, some of the really dumb hobby debates that were going back a few years with some of the ultra modern cards. So we've come a long way in a short amount of time, I think, for a lot of hobbyists. Stay healthy, stay awesome.
Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life.
And I will talk to you again later.